It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Federal Reserve. I got to tell you, it seems very, very curious. Seems very on point that a recession is coming. A recession is coming because it's wanted, not because it's a natural thing that, can't help it. It just happens. Who knew? No. Decisions, policies, ideas, thoughts. Federal Reserve raised interest rates 0.25% again. And you go, why? Why? Inflation's slowing. Everyone's going, inflation's slowing. Even the Federal Reserve says inflation's slowing, but we're still going to remain aggressive. And why? Why? Well, because the wealthy in corporate America want a recession. They want the pain and suffering that's going to come with a recession. They want to claw back the power that they once had over those working stiffs. They want to claw back that power. They want to lower wages. That's the reality. And we're seeing it playing out. And what's interesting to me is again, our politics play into this as well, because if you look at what the Federal Reserve is doing, raising rates really aggressively, in fact, much more aggressively than most economists think is needed, except the really crazy way out ones who, again, on corporate payrolls. Add that to the conservative messaging around inflation that really has been covering for the corporate greed and gouging that we've all been suffering under. And we're being set up for a rude awakening. I mean, we really are. This seems planned. It seems planned to move the country further towards corporate rule. You got to create those crises, because out of every good crisis, there's opportunity. And you see it all over these social media apps where these rich people are going, hey, be prepared for when it comes, because it's like they know what's coming. We've seen this movie. We've seen the game before. We know how the Fed works. We know how rich people work. It's how they get richer. They get richer by making the poor poorer. And the sad reality is we're falling for it. You look at the responses people have to problems, and it's all simplistic. It's all Joe Biden's fault. Oh, how much easier can it be? Blame the old guy in the White House. The guy that they say can't do anything. Sleepy Joe doesn't know where he is, but he's doing all this stuff. He's crashing the economy. It's all his fault. And it's easy to blame on that, because if it were something more than that, well, then people might organize around it. People might have some outrage at the fact that they're being gouged. Nobody likes to get ripped off, right, left, or center, red hat or blue hat. Nobody likes to get ripped off. And we're in this moment. And again, you look over the last several decades, what has happened? Crisis. And what comes out of crisis? Oh, sorry, working people, tighten the belt. Tighten the belt. You go back to the 70s. Stagflation. Oh, we gotta crush those unions and those wages. We need to privatize. We need to deregulate. We need to privatize. And the birth of neoliberalism. We give corporate America all this power. They'll crush those workers. Don't you just worry. And Carter allowed it with trucking deregulation and airline deregulation, and you effectively crushed those industries. And Reagan came in full tilt boogie with his supply side voodoo Reaganomics and massive tax cuts, took the top marginal tax rate from 70% all the way down to 28%, creating a massive deficit, and then get people concerned. Oh, we're spending too much money, on those social programs. Because be afraid, the boogeyman, we got to spend all this money on military, and you can't question that. And they've trained us over the decades. They've trained us to think that anytime there's a crisis, working people have to take it on the chin. Anytime there's a crisis, we need to destroy our social safety net so that the wealthy can have more, because they're smart. They know what to do with the money, and they are. They do know what to do with it. They make more for themselves. And the sad reality is Democrats have not been the greatest champions either. Like I said, Carter, during his administration, neoliberalism took root. And it fully flourished under Reagan. Clinton, while better than Dole or H.W. Bush, did really dumb stuff. Bad trade deals, bad social policy, bad corporate policy, laid the groundwork for all of the horrible. And again, this idea that we've got to compromise. We've got to work together. And moved us, full tilt boogie down the neoliberal superhighway. Privatization, deregulation, profitization. And what we've done over these last decades, we've sold off our cities, we've sold off our infrastructure, we've sold off our souls, basically, because, got to tighten the belt. And the thing that bothers me is, again, we keep falling into this. And, you can go through each of the president's eras and you can go, this was bad, this was good, this was, I look at the Trump era. And what's interesting to me is I'm now listening to people tell me how much they're concerned about debt and deficits, when during those 4 years of the Trump era, we literally spent a quarter of our debt. Nobody seemed to care about it then, spending like drunken sailors. And in fact, everyone tells me how great the economy was under Trump while doing massive, enormous amounts of deficit spending. Again, disconnect. But telling me how wonderful everything was, propped up on debt spending. But now we've got to cut all that out. It's crazy. And the weird thing is this is not new. What is new? And I had someone ask me what was the worst part of the Trump administration? And I said, the worst part of the Trump era was finding out, not about what Trump was or what Trump was going to do. We knew he was going to do all of the things he did. We knew he was going to be involved in scandal after scandal. We knew he was going to run the White House like a mafia don. We knew that. What we didn't know, and what we learned during that era is, we learned an awful lot about our family, friends, and neighbors. We're finding out more every day now. These hearings are coming out, these depositions, all of this stuff in the courts. For instance, one of the controllers at the Trump organization's talking about the hush money payments that they use to keep people in line. Who didn't already know that? We're just now confirming it in the court, when someone putting their hand on the Bible. But the thing that gets me is, the thing that bothers me is the idea that we were all somewhere, somewhere in the same book. We all kind of had the same ideas, somewhere in, maybe not on the same chapter or the same page, but at least in the same library, at the minimum. And here we are in this weird moment of alternative facts and alternative realities and all of this division and hatred and I've got to win. Look, I remember learning as a kid about, book bans of the 50s. And you go, it's ludicrous. Who would do such a thing? Why would you do such a thing? How could that happen? And yet here we are. They're banning books. I mean, they're not burning them yet. Keyword yet. I mean, it's coming. This kind of wow. And the thing that gets me is we're not allowed to come to solutions. We're not allowed. We've got to have our hats, got our red hat or our blue hat. We've got our polar opposite camps, and we cannot, no, ever. And our politics used to be that place where we did come together, where we did, compromise a little bit, and we were able to hold on to our values a little bit, but you got things done. The problem is the fight. The fight is more important than the solution. We've got lucrative industries out there that are making tons of money off of division. There are cottage industries on how we can stoke division, For instance, I got an email from Wayne LaPierre today. You go, who's Wayne LaPierre? He's the gun guy. He's the head of the National Rifle Association, the gun fetish guy, who sent me this email and said that the title line was, "The NRA will always stand up for your rights." Okay. In the email, he says, and I go, look, I'm not against people and their rights. We want to fight for rights. Wayne LaPierre says the NRA is the only organization standing in the way of widespread gun confiscation. What? Where's that? Where's that at? Did I miss something? Are they in the same van with the stove troopers? Do we have roving marauders going house to house stealing guns? No, the answer is no. Literally nobody is calling for that. Nobody. Nobody. But this is the kind of stuff that they stoke, because they get the simple to go, they're going to come for my guns. Nobody's coming for your guns. Nobody. But there's a lot of money by the NRA to be made by this. They want you to pay your dues. They want the gun manufacturers to keep ramping up production to get you to go, oh, they're gonna take this. I better go buy some more. Obama was the greatest salesman for guns, because they were able to go, hey, he's coming for your gun. He never was, but they sold it as that. And people went out in droves and bought guns they probably never even opened, because they were coming. And who made money? The NRA. Because for them, the solution, and understand, the majority of people agree on solutions on how we move forward on the gun issue. Universal background checks, universally accepted. High numbers of both Democrats and Republicans. Accountability, something we used to believe in. No, can't do that anymore. Sorry. And it's not just that. It's not the gun issue. It's all of them. Immigration's another thing. We're never going to be allowed to come to an immigration issue, because you've got the belief that one side wants to swing the doors wide open and let everybody in, let billions of people in, and the other side that wants to build a 4,000-foot wall, 16 feet deep, so that no one ever comes in. We're isolated from the rest of the world and nothing. And sorry, that's not how the world works. But a solution's never coming, because it's the outrage. We've got to keep us ticked off at each other, got to keep us angry. And yet today I find a report from the Commonwealth Fund. And this is one of those moments where you go, and again, another problem, not going to be solved because we're so divided and pitted against each other. Commonwealth Fund report finds that the United States is experiencing the worst health outcomes in the entire world, higher than any other country equal to our income. We're more likely to die younger and from avoidable causes. According to the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the globe of countries, like us, the OECD countries, they spend about 9.6% of their GDP on healthcare. You know how much we spend? Almost 18%. Nearly double. And yet we get worse outcomes in wide arrays of infant mortality, maternal death rates. You go highest in the world, actually. Highest suicide rates in the world. Highest maternal and infant mortality rates, the highest death rates of avoidable and treatable diseases. And why? Because we have the lowest rates of practicing physicians in hospitals, hospital beds per 1,000 people. We have the lowest rates of people going to see the doctor, because we've got a privatized system that says everybody's got to have skin in the game, which means every time you go to the doctor, if you can get an appointment, you're digging into your pocket. We're the only country that doesn't have universal national health care, and yet we pay almost double what everybody else is. Now understand, we know that we've known this for a long time. Nothing new, nothing surprising, nothing shocking. It is what has been happening to us. But we don't get to talk about that because we're still talking about they're going to take my guns. And we need a wall. And we're fighting over masks. And we're fighting over stuff that's meant to divide and keep us pitted against each other. Because we can't talk about really solving problems. We've just got to be angry at each other. And our politics is where this is happening. And look, the plan going forward to privatize and profitize and destroy Medicare and Medicaid, that's their answer. Make it more expensive, make it more further out of reach, and again, harm working people. Again, every one of these crises that they create, who gets the short end of the stick? You do. I do. We do. So when do we put it down? When do we say enough already? Want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, or give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
I've been driving buses for 5 years, and my day-to-day routine is I wake up a little earlier than most people. I get on a bus, I go out, I pick up some students and make sure they get to school nice and safe. Here in Fairbanks, Alaska, that can be a challenge because of the winter weather and the icy roads. But I love the job. So the Teamsters are great. They provide us a lot of protections. They've always taken care of their people, made sure that our jobs were secure. We didn't have to worry about whether or not we'd have a job from day to day.
And that's amazing because before we'd be working 4, 6, 8 hours a day and only earning minimum wage was real difficult to make a living. And the Teamsters pushed a lot so we make something we can live off of and not have to have a second job. What absolutely gives me peace of mind, the union membership allows me to focus on this job without having to worry about whether or not my family is going to be taken care of. I'm Andrew Case, and I'm proud to be Teamsters Local 959.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So Virginia's back in the news. Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin asked the House and the Senate there to fix a screw-up, because evidently they've had a little accounting error, something very minor on the education front. Simple spreadsheet mistake. Oops. Could happen to anyone. Happens every day. You overcalculate about $203 billion in education funding. Could have happened to anyone. It was a Post-it note got misplaced. So K through 12 funding, about $203 million short. Now he's asking to fix it because he got caught. They finally figured out, this is going to really screw over some school districts, especially our rural base. Because this is the dirty little secret. Rural schools are much more dependent on state funding across the country than our urban schools. Because urban schools are already taking it on the chin. It's those rural schools who are used to having high school football games and used to having stuff because they've been getting money from the state. This was kind of their money. So seeing Republicans spring to action in Virginia, kind of impressive. Because they know who their constituents are. And they're going to fill this gap. Don't know how yet. I'm not sure. But they say that they're going to make those rural school districts whole. No real talk about the urban school districts. Now, this is one of those moments where you go, where are they coming up with 200? And I guess it's 201 million. The Post-it note was a little off. $201 million over the next 2 years in that state for education. Where are they going to get it? I'm not sure yet. I'm sure they're gonna fudge the numbers, and you know where it's coming from, right? It's going to come from the more vulnerable people. It's going to come from the disabled. It's going to come from low income, you name it. It's going to come from the people who don't have advocates who are going to be able to stand up and fight for themselves. And this is sadly how this game plays out all the time. And this is where my frustration is. There are moments where we could rally together and say, no, maybe we should have the Glenn Youngkins of the world dig a little deeper into their pocket, because they got deep pockets. They can afford to fund education. Instead of all of these schemes to defund our public education system, how about we have a plan to, fully fund them? But no. I'm waiting to see. Again, devil in the details. We'll find out where they're going to shake out $201 million. Maybe they've got big couch cushions. I don't know. Maybe there's some, when they do the laundry, a check will fall out. I don't know, but it's going to be a heavy lift, and there are going to be people who are going to suffer for this. And who do you think that's going to be? And this for me is the central question in every one of these political debates. Who are the winners? Who are the losers? It goes back to high school government. My teacher back then said government decides who gets what. And for too long, the working class of this country has been getting the screws because we haven't organized our political power. We haven't organized our ability to stand up and say no more. So for me, over the next couple of days, we may see it trickle. We may see, I almost guarantee it's going to come from disability funding. It's going to come from low-income housing and heating and those kind of things to help the poor. Because, they're already down there. Might as well kick them. Because it's what they do well. Under the guise, and this is, again, I keep coming back to this, under the guise that we're this grand Christian nation. Under the guise that, we're our, I'm not going to say brothers keepers, because that's out the window. But in looking at this, again, Virginia's another state like Pennsylvania, like Iowa. All of these schemes with the goal of one thing: privatize public education. I'll have to tell you, I don't think this was an accident. I know, Rick, sounds conspiratorial. I don't know. Seems convenient. Seems like a large amount of money, kind of too big to be missed. It's not like a rounding error. It's not like, we moved the decimal point one and, oops. It's not like that. And it's interesting how the oopses always are on the negative for working people. It's never, oops, we taxed the rich too much. Oops, we asked Glenn Youngkin to kick in too much. It's never that. It's always, oops, sorry, poor people. Tighten the belt. Oh, gee, we would have loved to have funded that education program. Oh, darn, next time. We'll get you on the rebound. It always seems, or am I the only one who sees this? And then here we go. School districts are going to have to make tough choices. And yet, the corporate side of education, they don't seem to run out of money. Especially if you turn on my local radio stations where they're advertising how wonderful Charter Week and Choice Week is and vouchers are. And yet when the studies come out, they don't do any better. In a lot of cases do worse. And a lot of them within 5 years fail. Like most businesses. And the question I come back to is, when do we say enough? When do we as working people finally come around to the idea that our interests are at least in the same library, maybe even in the same book and on the same chapter? I want to go back to believing that we all have the same wants and needs and hopes. But I'll tell you, it's getting harder and harder. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Wherever you get your favorite podcasts, you'll find ours.
Hey, this is Ken Casey from the Dropkick Murphys, and you're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Indigenous people have been saying that we feel a shift in the climate for decades. Climate change is here. The time is now to pass the torch on to the next generation of clean energy warriors. We need to put the land back to work for our people. That means creating jobs for them to live and thrive in our communities. The time is now. Congress must invest in clean energy.
From the steel mills of Pennsylvania, to the auto factories of Michigan, to the modern makers movement, manufacturing makes our nation great. I'm Scott Paul, president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. We bring business and labor together to advocate for policies that everyone can agree on. Together, we can strengthen manufacturing and create good-paying American jobs. Help us keep it made in America.
The best way to strengthen America's economy? How about investing in America's fastest growing industry? Clean energy. It means millions of jobs that pay well and can't be outsourced. And lower utility costs for families. Congress, let's get it done.
Before we close the program, we want to take a moment to thank our viewers and to share a little bit about why we do what we do. At The Rick Smith Show, we believe that media today is almost entirely controlled by corporate greed. So we have now 24-hour news channels. But instead of 24 hours of news, what we get is 1 hour repeated 24 times, and with tons of commercials creating obscene amounts of profits. Information once presented as a public service has now become a private commodity. So when lies make money, lies are what we get. We get a corporate-controlled rage machine feeding us anger and hate, trying to convince us that our problems are right, left, or red, blue, when they are and always have been up, down, the wealthiest 1% versus the rest of us. Our goal is to be an alternative to that machine, not as a news show with a fancy journalist out front, but as a talk show run by a union truck driver and a team of working-class heroes just like you. Everything we do, both what we get right and what we get wrong, is dedicated to advancing the interests of America's working families. No corporate ad buys, no think tanks, no focus groups, no talking points. We are media by working people, for working people. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.